Today we're going to be talking about market segmentation and what it is that motivates tourists to make their selections for the destinations that they visit. So when we talk about market segmentation, really what we're doing is, if you've ever heard the term target market, you can't look at every single tourist and say that they are all the same, that they all want the same sort of thing. What we have to do is we have to look at tourists and we have to break them up into groups that have similar characteristics. And we use these similar characteristics to market to them differently. So the way that we market something to a child is very different from the way we market something to an adult. Men and women often have different ways of perceiving things, and so we market to them differently. So often a tourist destination or a tourist attraction or whatever it may be may have multiple different target markets, but each one of these target markets has to be large enough to be profitable. So you're looking at both the size, so the number of people, and then also the spending power of those various different groups. And then we decide how it is that we can best market to these groups. How do we reach these groups? So for instance, if you're talking about older adults, you may be doing direct marketing with them as opposed to a very young group who may want all of their information through Facebook and Instagram. So we really have to be thinking about how do we reach the various different groups of customers that we may have. And it's really important to do this because obviously in our industry there's a lot of competition, and there's even competition between target groups and different brands. So we need to make sure that we are placing ourselves in a way to have an advantage over our competition, particularly given that very often we are trying to attract the same customer segments. So there are a few different ways that we can market to these different groups and that we segment our customers. One of those is by what we call personal characteristics. And we often talk about geographics, demographics, and psychographics. So you are probably most familiar with demographics, okay? Because this is things like age, gender, education, type of family makeup, ethnic groups, income level, all of those sorts of things. So this is probably the easiest group for you to understand because you're used to it. Geographics are a little different. Geographics is actually where someone is from. So people from Asia may have a very different view than people from Europe. Somebody who comes from an urban, a big city is different from people who come from rural areas. So we need to be thinking about that. But what we're going to talk about today is actually about psychographics. This is another way of looking at our customers according to things like personality types, lifestyles, the values, and the morals that these types of people have. So as we get started here, first of all, let's go back to Butler's life cycle for a second. And we really talked about this top bit up here, okay? We talked about the ones in red as being part of Doxy's iridex. We talked about these other bits up here as being part of Butler's life cycle. But these words down here, this is part of something that Eric Cohen came up with. Eric Cohen is a very famous researcher, and he does a lot with determining types of tourists. So a drifter is somebody who's brand new to a destination. You have very few people in that destination, and so that's why they're drifters, is because there's so few of them. However, as you move along and tourism becomes more established in an area, you have what we call our mass tourists. So whether they're your individual mass tourist or organized mass tourists are people who typically come in groups, large tour groups. So there is a reading for you for this week related to Cohen's typologies and discussing these various types of tourists. But Cohen also gets into something a bit more specific with tourist typologies when it comes to the psychology of tourists, okay? And so this is what we call Cohen's modes. And so he's broken up people according to basically how they sort of view the psychology basis for how they make decisions in their vacations. So these words tend to be a bit difficult for my students, so don't worry too much about those. Let's just focus on these ones at the bottom. So amusement-focused tourists. These are the people who are really just looking to have fun in a destination. They want to have a good time. They just want a change of pace, and they don't necessarily care how they're getting it. So they don't need a really true, authentic experience. They just want to be entertained and have a good time. So these might be people who just enjoy going to Disney or going to an amusement park. They don't care that everything there is fake. They just want to have fun. Moving along, we have people that are more change-oriented. So these are people who, they probably work stressful jobs. They're kind of bored with the situation they're in. And so they're really looking to escape from their daily lives and probably recover and relax a little bit more. So these change-based tourists, they're often looking for a resort or a spa, somewhere where they don't have to worry so much about time, they can leave their phone behind, they don't have to worry about constantly being on their emails, they just want to kind of relax, recover, sleep a bit, and enjoy some quiet time. Then we have people who are what we call our interest-focused tourists. These are our tourists who they may actually be a bit more interested in, trying something different, trying something new. They may be, want to get away from the normal environment that they are in. So these are people who often are searching for something more interesting, kind of thinking about life and saying, oh, there's more to life than this. There's more to where I live than this. Let's try something different. So they want surroundings that are a bit, unusual and different from what they normally have. And so that's why sometimes we have these folks that are interested in kind of stimulating the imagination and really trying to do something different. Rapture tourists are tourists who are very often, so as we get more towards this side, okay, these are people who are more interested in authentic, true experiences. Over here on this end of the spectrum, amusement folks, they just want to have fun and they don't care if it's fake. So the closer that we move to dedication, the more they want a true, kind of more authentic experience. So your rapture tourists, these are tourists who are more interested in, connecting with locals, having an experience that maybe stimulates their physical and spiritual beliefs. They want a bit of a more authentic experience, but they don't necessarily want to go all in. So for instance, these might be your people who go rock climbing, and so they're really challenging their bodies to try something different. They may be your folks that are going to a yoga retreat or a silent retreat and really challenging themselves to try something different and new, but they're not 100% in because they know that they can leave after that holiday is over. And then we have what we call our dedicated tourists. These are folks that really want to completely detach from their normal environments and have a very authentic, true, legitimate experience. So they really emphasize their connection to the culture and the people in a particular area. They really want to be part of the real world. I traveled with a student like this once, and he was constantly asking the question, well, is this what you eat? Is this what you drink? Is this where he would ask this to the locals. Is this where you would normally go shopping? Oh, you're suggesting we go to the show. Is this a show that locals go to? So he really wanted this authentic experience that was very important to him. And so very often, this is what drives people to choose different places. If you send somebody to Walt Disney World and they are a very dedicated tourist that wants, to see real castles and real culture, they're not going to like this Mickey Mouse view of things. So it's important for us to know as operators what it is that we can realistically offer people and what kinds of folks are going to come to us so that we are marketing and hopefully meeting their expectations. Other things to consider with regard to market segmentation. Very often we segment markets according to products. So for instance, this is where things like, are these high users? Are these people that are, what kind of purchase is this? Business folks versus leisure business. Are these people that are buying our service because they are looking for particular benefits, whether it's status or luxury, or are people coming to our hotel because it's a budget hotel and they don't have to pay a lot? So this is another way that we can segment our customers and sell to them appropriately. So tourists are essentially motivated by all kinds of different things. Sometimes it's needs, sometimes it's wants. Very often it's lifestyles, so they have values or hobbies or moral beliefs that they want to have met. And this really ties in with our destinations. Now, I had mentioned this before with regard to the destinations, how there are very often when we're looking at generating regions, there are things that are pushing people away from their homes to go somewhere. And with the actual destination region, there are certain things that are pulling them to those areas. So for instance, us Australians may be pushed to get away from Australia because we want to have snow sports. And snow sports here in Australia, well, we have a little bit of snow in a few areas, but not for the most part. So this relates back to that leap year's tourism system and how a generating region pushes people away from their homes and a destination region pulls people into a particular destination because of what's on offer there. So this is also what very much motivates our tourists. You may be familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Now, we don't really think of this too much when we consider tourism, simply because a lot of these lower needs are already met, ideally. I mean, yes, our hotels provide food and water and rest and that, security, that sort of thing. But typically our tourists are looking up here for meeting these ideas of esteem or self-actualization. But this is something that you will probably hear more about in some of the other business classes that you take. So one more theory that I wanted to mention to you that really influences our tourists and really motivates them. Again, this is another one of those bell curves where people tend to fall from one area to the other. So we've got our customers, our tourists who are very psychocentric, and then we have other ones on the other end that are very allocentric. Our psychocentric customers, our tourists, tend to be people who don't travel a whole lot and they don't really like unfamiliar destinations. So they want to stay close to home or places that look very familiar to them. This is as opposed to allocentric people who really like to try new things. They are very adventurous. They might be willing to go to very new and unusual places where things are remote. It may be untouched destinations. And then, of course, in the middle, we have our mid-centric folks. These may be people who want some adventure but don't want to be too far from home. They want to have those comforts there. And these are our largest group of tourists. So again, these folks, this is another way of determining how our customers are motivated and how we can go ahead and market to them. So there are a number of readings for you that really reinforce all of these different topics that I've mentioned in here. Please make sure you take a look at those because these are things that we are constantly going back to within the industry and discussing, and it really makes a difference for how we develop the products and services that we offer, and then also how we market to the customers or the new guests that we want to attract.